Welcome, everybody, to the Revenue Cycle Truth Podcast. My name is Josh Fearling, and today I'm excited because we're going to talk about money, more particularly making money in Medicaid. So we're going to talk about Medicaid and making money with Medicaid. Maybe that's an oxymoron, I'm not sure, but we definitely are seeing a lot of money being made with Medicaid. So I'm joined with Bridget Broman, who's the manager of our Denial and Medical Appeal Department. Bridget has an enormous amount of experience in this area, works with some of the greatest denial experts, RNs in the industry, and this should be an exciting conversation. So thanks for joining us, Bridget.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Medicaid, making money in Medicaid, and this might be an installment series with a bunch of different installments, but today we're going to talk about ER recovery with Medicaid, which I think is a huge thing that hospitals can unlock. There is just so much money to be unlocked in the ER in many states. So many states we have found receive lower reimbursement rates for Medicaid ER visits. And so Bridget and I are going to talk about that. So Bridget, I guess the first question is why does this happen?
Medicaid has what they call an auto pay list, and it's a listing of diagnosis codes that Medicaid considers emergence. And if a claim is filed with one of these diagnosis codes that qualifies for an emergency, the claim will pay at the hospital's contracted rates. But there are a lot of different diagnosis codes that do not qualify for the payer's auto pay list. And when that happens, the payer will pay at a reduced case rate or a reduced percentage to what the hospital is actually expecting.
Got it. Great. Okay. Yeah, and we've seen this happen in a number of different states, correct?
That is correct.
And then I know finding these are kind of takes a specialty in itself, but I guess how does you and your team identify these accounts?
Identifying them can be challenging. We find a lot of these Medicaid payers will process the claim using a reason code that shows contractual. And depending on how that hospital's AR system is set up, there could be a lot of lost revenue that the hospitals don't even know about, because when those remittances are coming through, there could just be adjustments being posted when there's money there to be had. What we do is we usually go in, and we have such a great system in place that we're able to identify like variances, different variances on these emergency room visits. And we can see some trending in that as well, where, certain payers will pay a certain case rate, whether it's $50 or whether it's $60. And some payers we've even seen pay the same percentage. So we look for different like trends when we're trying to identify those emergency room visits. And once we have that in place, we have the tools where we can search and go through very large volumes of these emergency room visits and place them directly into my nurses' work queue so that they can begin reviewing the medical records and composing the appeal to go out to the insurance companies.
Great. Yeah, great description. Okay. And then the skill set. I know that we have, a lot of people with a lot of experience, great people with a lot of experience in this, a number of nurses that work this. Talk a little bit about the skill set that's needed to be able to receive the higher rate.
Okay. Well, it's very important that the nurses, or that we have a nurse reviewing these medical records. Nurses are able to look at a record and pull out some important details to help support medical necessity. A lot of times what we see with these emergency room visits is they are coded with a diagnosis code that just doesn't meet criteria. But the situation for why the patient came to the ER is emergent. I can use an example such as, let's see, a child playing in the backyard or riding their bike, and this child falls off his bike and hits his head on the sidewalk or on the concrete. And the parents, of course, are going to bring this child to the emergency room. And because of the situation and what happens, we have to explain to the payer why this is emergent and why the patient came to the ER. And that's how we can get these to overturn. And that's just one example of so many different situations on why a patient can come to the ER and need to be seen on an emergent basis. But, you know, the whole key is to rule out an acute injury or an acute illness. So it's very important that these nurses show the payer, this is why this was an emergency, and this is what we found.
Right. And I know a lot of hospitals try to address this, but by just sending the, you know, when they can't identify it, some obviously can't identify it because it's a little tricky, because often on the remit, right, it's kind of it's difficult to determine if this is one of those cases. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that's why, like I said, we have different tools in place that we use with our system that can identify these in an efficient way.
Got it. And where I was going with this also, it's I have seen situations where hospitals kind of send the medical record, but that's not going to really work with these Medicaid ER visits, right? It's kind of, you got to have an individualized letter. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. And that's another important thing, is that because I have nurses on staff, they do care about a lot of these patients. And these nurses write for every record that comes through. We review each one and we write an individualized letter for each situation to try to get these overturned. And we also don't cherry pick these accounts as well. We try to appeal just as much as possible, because we find there's just certain situations where these payers, they will overturn them. So I think it's very important to, you know, we try everything at least one time.
Yeah, that's great. And the other part, in addition to just increasing the cash in Medicaid related to these accounts and really bringing in a windfall of cash, there's a lot of added value that can be realized by the hospital, additional added value, right? You have these RNs looking at it and your staff looking at it, and they can you know, determine frequent flyers, identify billing and coding issues, ensure HIPAA compliance. You know, there's a lot of other things, right, that can be kind of the added value back to the hospital as part of it.
Yep, that's correct. We've identified issues in the way the hospital has leveled. We've been able to provide feedback on how they're leveling their emergency room visits. We have found claims with diagnostics or laboratory services billed that were not in the medical record, and the hospital was able to remove those. We've even found opportunities where there could be a chest x-ray done, but they didn't bill for a chest x-ray. So let's get that on the claim so that you can get your reimbursement for that. We've also identified frequent flyers. You know, this is a Medicaid population, so they do use the emergency room as a doctor's office. So we've been able to contact these patients' case managers and have them reach out to the patient to see if they can get the care that they need. So they're not visiting the emergency room all the time for the common cold or, you know, some of those, a rash or something like that. They can actually go to a doctor's office where they should be going if it's not an emergency.
Okay. All right. Well, this is great. Bridget, thanks so much for your time. Hope to do more of these, but this one, in terms of recovery in the ER Medicaid space, is an excellent source of cash for hospitals, and I really appreciate your time, Bridget. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Josh. It was my pleasure.